Hi, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Eric Helms and Alberto Nunez as we talk about embracing the suck and sacrificing to win. Bodybuilding is an extreme sport, and although recent generations have found some more efficient and practical ways to go about it, we can't forget that shit gets difficult. At some point, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt a lot. So, in this episode, we discuss some terrible times, some pleasant times, and some of the times that we actually suffered unnecessarily. We also go into strategies on how to deal with hunger, when to eat out, when not to eat out, when it's time to make drastic changes in your life in order to reach your bodybuilding goals. So if you've ever wondered if you had what it takes to be a competitor, this episode is definitely for you. Here it is, guys. Sacrifice to Win with Eric Helms and Alberto Nunez. First bodybuilding season, what year?
2007.
Most recent-ish one?
2011.
All right. Would you say that either of those were balanced, and in which way? What is balanced?
I think balance is all related to the context of that person's life.
Okay. Give me the first one.
2007 was not balanced at all.
Okay.
Everything was about bodybuilding.
Okay.
Even when I had no reason to be.
Yeah.
I'd spend my free time on the bodybuilding.com forums.
Right.
So
with Berto.
That was exactly, with Berto. That was much more, I would say, of an obsession.
Okay.
I mean, I enjoyed it. I loved it. That's why I was obsessed. But I also couldn't turn it off. I didn't like that because there'd be times where I couldn't. I would try to interact with people, and I'm like, yes, I'm interested in what you're saying. Can we talk about bodybuilding? I was like, what's going on in my head all the time? And I wasn't interested. That was just what I wanted there, which was the case. So yeah, I mean, I think that's how I start with most things. Though I tend to get really, really passionate and grip it, and then it takes over my whole life, and then I have to find after that I work towards finding a way that it fits into my life.
But do you think that's bad?
No, I think that's actually, for at least for my personality, that's the natural progression towards balance. People don't start balanced. I think that's something that is a misconception. Like, you know, we as 3DMJ coaches, like, we help people find it, but balance is something that you have to constantly work on and work towards. It's inherently difficult. Like, if you think about balancing on a balance beam, you know, there is something that is pushing you off balance in the first place for you to find balance. And I think it's very, very context specific. Like, so for example, I'm doing a PhD. I have all these goals for my career. I see that almost like automatic. That is my life, right? It's not part of my life. I don't have to balance bodybuilding with that. That's what I'm going to do, period. You know, it's like brushing my teeth, but on a global scale. That's who I am. It's what I do. And I take bodybuilding very seriously, but I fit it into that context of my life. So it's not like I don't go to the lab and don't do my job, or don't respond to client emails, or don't write what I have to do, or don't get on these Skypes with you guys. I make my bodybuilding schedule around that. The version of that in my mind, which wouldn't be balanced, would be me doing the opposite, where things that are my life are getting transplanted or displaced by bodybuilding, and it ends up being a detractor.
Okay. So I think that's all super fucking important. That was really good, actually. And I think it'd be important for the listeners to know that the whole point of us doing this is that we've, I guess, found that there was like a big sway of the pendulum, right? So back in the day, up until I'd say the last decade, bodybuilding was like hardcore because no days off, because outwork, because all in obsession, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out you don't necessarily have to do that. And it's like everyone almost swung the opposite way. Do you agree, Bert, for quite the last few years?
Yeah, there was a time where those animal pack ads, those infamous animal pack ads that just were a little misleading, but certainly bodybuilding has segments where, perhaps, like, you're 4 weeks out, what balance is at that point in time might be a little different than the off season, or the majority of your time bodybuilding. And that was like the norm. Like, I think to a lot of people, those ads spoke. And for those of you guys who are not familiar, I think Animal Packing, I don't know if I think it was Universal. They were Universal ads, and they were big in like the early 2000s, I believe. And they just had a bunch of scenarios that I think were common to bodybuilders at the time because they felt they had to do that. Bunch of just...
The Animal Pack was like the 12 multivitamins you had to take 3 times a day at the same time to be anabolic, right?
But the thing is, it's like the supplement didn't even matter. It was whoever did that ad campaign honestly should get some kind of award, because it captured the like emotional state of what it means to be a bodybuilder, or supposedly a hardcore bodybuilder. Like, it would be a picture of a dude, black and white, and he's living in a 1-bedroom apartment, and he's got a poster of his favorite bodybuilder, and he's just sitting there looking in the mirror, and that's it. And then another one is him in the gym, and it's like this dark, dank dungeon, and it's probably 5 a.m. because got to, or whatever. So it just very much, it encapsulated the idea of complete focus and dedication.
Yeah, and anything that I've ever worked hard for, like you, Eric, like you said, like I like being in that state. And although a lot of people would say that that's dangerous, on the flip side, a lot of people would say, like, well, that's how I'm not, like, still at home doing what I was doing 12 years ago kind of thing. And I think that balance needs to be different for a lot of people. But I find, now that I'm coaching, that people have gone too far from the Animal Pack ad and are almost... like you said, you see these people that are successful, like the 5 of us, people consider successful because we've learned how to live a life and build careers while not being obsessed. But it's only not being obsessed anymore, because every single one of us was. And like you said, everything kind of starts like that for most people. And honestly, anything that never started like that, I never really cared about.
I'm not sure the average person would see us as not obsessed.
That's a good point.
Yeah, like, I mean, I spend 12 hours a week in the gym,
Yeah.
And
I spend like 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, exactly. And then actually, that's a really good point. You spend 20 because your sport requires it. I spend 12. Right.
Yeah.
I spend 12 because my sport requires it. I think the issue and the unhealthy part comes when people try to get extra credit. Like, they try to go all in. They want to be the bodybuilder. They want to be the powerlifter. They want to be the epitome of what that tribe tells them to be. So they eschew personal relationships. They eat clean, even if they aren't necessarily, even if they're just unsure if it matters or not. You know what I'm saying? And like, just in case kind of mentality, or I won't do that just because it doesn't line up with my idea of it supporting everything 100% all in kind of thing. And I think the difference from me in 2007 to now is just that I have an understanding of what does matter. And honestly, I feel like I'm 95% on all the things that do matter. It's just I don't go for extra credit because I know it does nothing. It might make me, I think in 2007, it made me feel belonging, and it made me feel part of a tribe, and it made me feel like I was taking this serious. And, eating a Pop-Tart, just as an example, even if it did for my macros and all that, that's not what bodybuilders do.
Yeah, that's weak.
And it has some intangible way of negatively affecting me, which I couldn't really describe to you, which is why Alberto did things like posting pictures of himself. We challenged that convention, yet tried to maintain a message of dedication, desire, and discipline. And it's a very nuanced perspective, which we've tried to cultivate as 3D Muscle Journey. And I think most other groups tend to make it one thing or the other,
Yeah.
Either it's Animal Pack ad, or it's none of that shit matters. Don't take it too seriously. This is just a hobby, and just hit your macros and lift weights,
Yeah. I think it's a trend, or like a misconception that's becoming more and more common, that we've disproven that, right? Like you said, you don't have to do the extra credit, but I think that in order to get in like if we want to be beach lean, that's a lot easier than like if you want to get contest shredded. Still, there is a lot more than people think goes into it. I think it's like we've shown that it's not as difficult as it has to be, but because of that, I feel like a lot of people just coming into it who missed that boat in the 1970s through 90s or whatever, expect
you
it
say
to be
1970s?
Yeah, 70s to 90s. What's wrong with that?
Are you saying Berto and I bodybuilding in the 70s?
No, I'm saying since pumping iron. I don't
Look,
like
you're in your
when
30s
y'all
too,
make
all
fun
right?
of me. I don't like when they do
Yeah,
this. We're editing this
over
out,
30.
We
Brandon.
don't like when you we don't like it when you call us old. That's all.
I didn't do that. You're
Just
sensitive.
messing with you.
He's sensitive, listeners.
I know.
It's okay. We won't make fun of you for being sensitive.
All right, go ahead. So when we were bodybuilding in the 70s.
So in 1845, when you hit the stage. No, but what I'm trying to get at is I feel like there's an unspoken, like, we kind of wish a lot of y'all would take it more seriously. Am I the only one who feels this way? I could be the bad.
Well,
I
I
can
think
be in
for
my
Eric and
recliner of
I-
rage again. That's fine. I don't,
Well, we both have seen both sides.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it frustrating is that we partook and
Yeah.
we did it that way. And I mean, going back to that, I kind of there were certain parts of that segment in my bodybuilding life that, man, they were awesome. And like I
Yeah.
look back and they were some of my best memories, like, to be honest. And even though it wasn't necessarily necessary, I think I learned quite a bit in regards to what I'm willing to do if I need to do that. And I think that's kind of the issue with a lot of this generation that's coming in, where, you know, they heard something like sacrifice to win, and it's got that, you know, that tone that, like, no one really does that anymore, dude. And it's like, no, if you want to, you know, be more than just some recreational lifter, you're going to have to do that every once in a while. And that goes for anything in life where if you want to excel at something, you will have to sacrifice to be better at that, to be good at that, to be as great as you want to be. So yeah, it's very frustrating because, well, I guess me and Eric almost feel like we earned our stripes in a way. Like we've done it the hard way, and then we slowly transitioned into this, and I just feel like a lot of people have missed out on that, or parts of that. They were certainly useful to this day.
Yeah. And we say it's not necessary, but regardless of whether it's physically necessary, I think there's something to that little bit of an elitist mentality that, yeah, I'm fucking going there. And I might not have to do all this, but I'm going to do it all because I'm going to make sure that nothing was left on the table, kind of thing. And so, like Eric said about that Pop-Tart, it's like, yeah, it's still going to fit my macros, but I'm above the Pop-Tart. Where it's like, did that mentality help him? Probably.
Yeah, I think this is going to sound funny, but I don't like having mindsets, beliefs, or mentalities.
Okay. And
the reason why is because there's always a context in which they don't make sense.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a perfect example of one of those times. Like, people ask me, hey, do you believe in high-frequency training? And I'm like, believe's not the right word. You know, that's not the way it works. I don't believe in high-frequency training. The evidence in certain cases would be useful if you use that. That's the science side of it.
Right.
But in terms of the more philosophical side of it, if you have the mindset, I'm a hardcore bodybuilder, you do the extra credit. You do things that aren't necessary. Yeah. And sometimes that can actually be counterproductive. You know, you're more fatigued than needed. You are dieting on too low of calories. You're doing too much cardio. You might actually look better being less of a hardcore bodybuilder. Mm-hmm. As just one example of how that could be problematic if you don't know what is important and what isn't. Right. Then on the flip side of it, if you have the mentality of that's not a big deal, it's just bodybuilding, and you know, the looser you can be, the better, kind of thing. And you've talked yourself into eating out every weekend. You might have prolonged your diet by six weeks, and you might not actually get into the kind of shape you hoped on time. You know, mm-hmm. So it's in both cases. There's the gray area and the caveats, and the context is missing because you have a mentality or a philosophy or a mindset rather than an actual understanding of what do I have to do. And that's what it really comes down to in my mind is, are you willing to do what's needed and do you understand what's needed? Period. And I guess that's where I feel I've personally matured to, is to have a more rational view of it, and just to have the self-confidence to know that I can and will do what is needed. And I guess that little element, that last part, is probably something I built, pushing myself to places I didn't even really have to go to before.
Right.
So I think that's where the value is.
And I believe in mindsets and all that stuff more than anything, because I truly believe I can trick myself in or out of anything. So there are times, and it's way easier for me to find the bro animal pack mindset, way easier. But there are times, which Berto helped me through, where I had to learn to adopt. Dude, this is not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's not, like you said, it's off season. Chill the fuck out, maybe sleep a little, eat some food, And I think that they're both useful, but knowing when I need to be one and when I need to be the other, like we've said in every podcast, like self-awareness comes with it. But I think I can't think that logically all the time. Or maybe
both of you guys said the exact same thing.
We said the same thing.
Both of you said the exact same thing. Yeah, in different ways, you end up at the exact same place.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's basically getting away for me from black and white thinking, and then what you said was knowing when to be black, when to be white. So it's you still have the switch, you just know when to turn it off.
Yeah.
And getting a little bit of a dimmer on it, which like you said, it's the same thing. I think, my just own intellectual evolution is probably as a scientist more than even a bodybuilder. I just started to realize how, the first time I realized that I got interviewed to be a personal trainer somewhere, and said, "So what's your philosophy of training?" And just like a light bulb, I went, having a philosophy of training is a terrible thing. Like,
yeah.
No, I should have a system based on evidence, not a philosophy, which implies it has, a belief system attached to it, and values, and when we're talking about designing something is more systematic than that. And of course that can include enjoyment, all those things. So I just, philosophies are kind of, they're rigid in some ways, as they sound like all amorphous and hippie and cool. But if it actually comes out that the way that things maybe should be done, or if there is solid evidence, doesn't match with that, are you going to let go of it? No, it's your philosophy, Yeah. So maybe my philosophy of training is, or whatever, is that it is evidence-based or holistic, or includes the ability to change. So I guess it just depends on how you describe it, but that, in my mind, that's the way it makes sense.
Yeah, and when I think we just defined philosophy as a word differently.
Probably.
But again, that's like Bert said, we're saying the same thing, but we have to interpret it whatever that means, interpret it in different ways. So Bert, what's your training philosophy? What's your prep philosophy? No, how do you like, you're about to prep, right? So how are you looking at it? You're tracking now. Is this you being like, all right, I gotta find the little mini animal pack ad, maybe just one of the pills, not 10, kind of thing? What are you going through in your brain?
I like fives.
What do you think about fives?
You and Mark.
I played that interview we just say inside their body language. It was so different. One was like that, and one was like wide open. Like, what do you think about fives?
Nobody knows what y'all are talking about. It's okay. It's more fun this way. I know. It's more fun this way.
If they get it, it's great. If they don't, they don't miss out on much. When I did my first prep, I kind of came full circle to some extent, because I had done gone crazy overboard, and then I finally decided to diet, and by then I was kind of in my chill the fuck out stage. And what ended up happening was like, dude, you can't do the competitive bodybuilding thing and chill out. Like, you actually need to get some of those behaviors that maybe were just not appropriate during other times in your bodybuilding career and apply them. And that's what I had to learn. So the first time I prepped, I was way too relaxed. Second time, I was a lot more. I brought back a lot of the Berto that I had exiled prior to that, and it went really well. And I think what every prep has done since then, it's like I've learned to just bring into play different levels of sacrifice and focus depending on where I'm at. It's just like little things, like maybe I cut out date night with my significant other once I'm 4 weeks out, but prior to that I keep it in there. I try to maybe have, like, one of the things I do that's most restrictive is at the end, you're not losing much weight. So I go really bro, and I have the exact same meal at the exact same time, even if I'm staying up till like 1 a.m. So, and then I'll wake up at this very controlled time to go and weigh in. Even if I have the chance to sleep in, I'll go weigh in and then I'll go back to bed. And I even cut fluids at a certain point, and that's just when I'm to that point where, like, you really have about a pound of body fat to lose. So yeah, and that would be totally not useful, like right now in the off season or even in the beginning of a contest prep. So I think I've learned to conserve energy. That's probably been what best explains what I've done at this point. I've learned to conserve energy as a competitive bodybuilder.
For perspective, can you let the listeners know that last pound, how long does that take you?
Shoot.
That's funny because that last pound could be a month. It could be 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I think especially for competitive bodybuilders, it's especially ones like me where I tend to waste away more than anything, especially past a certain point. I'd much rather be extra patient, and I think for just most people, that last bit, the scale is useful, and like via my system, I'm trying to make the scale a bit more useful. But honestly, like when I look at my average weigh-ins, like during that segment of a prep, they really don't even change much. Yeah. It's just the appearance. But yeah, it can take up to 6 weeks at that point. Weight loss does get, when you have about 10 pounds of fat on your body, it will definitely take a little longer to mobilize.
Yeah. I think the longest I went last prep, I think there was like 2 different spots where I went like 5 weeks without hitting a ounce lower. Like to hit a new low, and I didn't do anything wrong. I hit everything right, did my job, but those last 5 pounds took 3 months, something like that, And so I think, and this is all coming from me as a relatively new coach, right? The last year or two, trying to get people that lean. And the things that I'm surprised about is, that being one of the expectation that the expectation that most people have that if they didn't lose this week, it was a failure of a week. Really early on too. Mm-hmm. Even off season kind of stuff, that it's like this week was a fail or a pass, or it was a good or a bad week, as opposed to it being the fact that you did your job, it was a good week, and sorry the scale didn't show it, but they get real beat up by that,
Yep. I think a huge part is, when you say sacrifice to win, it makes you think getting yourself into an emotional fury and pushing yourself really hard. But in reality, a lot of the hardest part of prep is actually controlling your emotions. Yeah. And talking yourself down from the ledge every day, So as you know, and probably most listeners know, I have a very tough time losing weight. And I have a lot of stalls, and it's confounded by, I guess we decided I'm kind of watery or whatever, right? Or I have, I go through whooshes and stalls, and I'm seem to be responsive to refeeds and things like that. But the main thing I had to learn how to do was to not over or under react to things, and then to try to stay calm in the pocket, but which was very difficult. And that was that's probably one of the hardest things for most people. And I think what takes more maturity is not letting your stress levels get the better of you and exacerbate that problem even further. So
there's that. And then the other, when that week was a good thing, they expect 0 changes from coach. When it was in their brain, we didn't lose, so we must do something different next week, So these are all just things that I'm finding out. So there's that weird thing of the attachment. Like the weekly check-ins are great for us to touch base, but they see it as like, I failed this week, I passed this week, and if I didn't lose, then we must change. So that's a common thing. But on the flip side, if I have someone that's, either has a show far off, or like you said, Bert, you're like the last 4 weeks, you really have to go there. But for a lot of people, I think until it's that close, they don't feel like they have to go there. You know, like you make that prep switch 8 months out and they're like, oh, I accidentally ate this. A couple weeks later, I accidentally ate that. And now before you know it, you're like, okay, we're only 4 months out. You know, and it's like, what have we been doing this whole time? And it's like, for me, the switch is very, again, it's a black and white for me. Okay, we're in prep mode. We don't fuck up. Whereas a lot of people have heard that, oh, okay, as it gets closer, it's more important. But when they're far out, it's like they're not ready to sacrifice this soon. Is that just my clients? Or have y'all seen? Go ahead.
Some people don't know how to sacrifice to win. That's an issue. It's like, you know, you said, you know, at a certain point, Berto, you turn it on and you go there. Yeah. Some people have no clue how to do that. And I think one thing that is, again, like because of social media, you know, they'll scan through their Instagram, they'll see all these like shredded people, and just, you know, that one snapshot of that, they don't necessarily see the work that went into that. Right. And what they potentially had to sacrifice to get there. And unfortunately, no one's really open to speak about those sort of things. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so a lot of people will come to us and they're like, I'm going to hire 3D Muscle Journey, so like instant shredded. That's just how it goes. Yeah. We hire 3D Muscle Journey, I'm gonna get shredded, and it's like, no, dude. With balance. This is gonna be and painlessly. This is gonna be fucking hard, and it might be the hardest thing you will have done up until this point in your life. Mm-hmm. And there's just there's no other way of putting it. Yeah. So no, a lot of people that's the big issue. Like when we talk about sacrificing to win and going there, learning to just kind of reshift and reprioritize things. Yeah. It's just something that's unknown to them. And I found two different, like, again, depending on the person, right? There's some people where you're like, okay, you messed up. We have to be gentle, forgive yourself, understand that you're human, and we move forward. And I've seen that works with some people of like, okay, you're too hard on yourself. And then they get so upset that they end up eating the whole pizza instead of 2 slices on accident. Mm-hmm. But then there's the other, which again relates to me and makes me happy that I'm not the only person it works with. Like there's a couple of conversations I've had that I'm like, look, are we an athlete or are we not? And that's it. Like, yeah, this looks like a fitness lifestyle thing on Instagram, but at this point it's like, if you want to get on stage, athletes get the job done, you know? And it's, I don't care if you have to go to that outing. You know, I went to this outing and I couldn't just look at this stuff. No, that's a drill. Like that's a test. You go to the dinner, you look at the food that you're not supposed to eat, and you stare at it, and you don't eat it, kind of thing. And it's worked a couple times, you know, like the whole Mike Ditka thing, like suck it up, Buttercup. You can't. And then, so it's interesting to see, like just how me and Eric, like you said, we said the same thing, but we said it really different in a way that it was meaningful for us. There's some people that I do feel like I have to coddle, and some where it's like you got to kind of smack around and understand that this isn't a 12-week transformation. This is. Would anyone in the NFL do that? Would anyone, you know, that kind of thing? And I think it's how you have to think of yourself.
I think the verbiage flipping the switch is actually really telling. And this almost might sound in conflict with what I said earlier about a mentality or a philosophy, but I do think flipping a switch is very important because in my mind what that is deciding what is an option and what is not. Right. Period. Yeah. You know? So once I start prepping, eating out is not an option except for my anniversary, my wife's birthday, Mother's Day, and a few other instances. Right. You know, it's so I don't actually get temptation going out. Yeah. And that's a benefit to it. It's not like I'm so hardcore I don't even get tempted by food. It's saying because I have actually completely committed to something. Right. That's not an option. And I think that's different than just applying these blanket rules that are wrong half the time. You know, having this hardcore mentality. You know, I can't have a Pop-Tart. It's saying I'm 100% committed. I am all in. You know, and I think the people who struggle with that are not actually. They don't know that this is really what they want. They don't have the self-awareness to be fully committed. Because I think it takes some self-awareness to evaluate your own goals and your desires to say, yes, this is what I want. No, I'm not hesitant about it. I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to be making it a reality over the next 6 months, and other options are not options.
Right.
this is the path I'm going to walk. And unless, a hurricane takes out the city where my show is, or I fall deathly ill, I'm going to do it. And I think that is the difference, not necessarily because some people, I think even people who don't have an athletic background, I think I'm a pretty good example of that. Like, I ran some track, I went through basic training, but I think there are plenty of people who had more inherent grind than I did. But I learned the grind through bodybuilding because I had that I'm going to do this no matter what mentality. And then I learned how hard I had to push myself, but because it wasn't an option not to, it forced me to learn how to grind. And then that was something that I continually got better at.
Yeah, and I think that when you say flipping a switch or whatever that means for someone, I think one of the unfortunate parts about the fact that anyone can enter a bodybuilding show, right? We talked about their sport. Most sports, you have a barrier to entry. You have to make a team. You have to be picked. You have to whatever. Here, anyone can do it. So I think because of that and the rise of like male physique and women's bikini, there's a lot of people who are like, let me try this for a year and see how it works. Whereas I think we all were like, we're fucking doing this. This is what we do now, and I think that although, yeah, it's great that anyone can technically enter a show, I think it makes it more often the mindset of like, let me give this a shot for a year and see if it can help me lose weight versus like, I'm now a bodybuilder. And I know we've talked about how that's not always the best mindset, but at least like I'm bodybuilding this year is a step, like I'm getting on stage this year versus like, let's see how it goes,
You're fully committed to your goal. That's period. I think that's the way you look at it. And I think the difference between unhealthy obsession, healthy obsession is I'm 100% committed to my goal, and then I'm having my first child and I don't make any allowance for that, versus, and I also have an understanding of priorities and being a human and my desires, not just right now, but in the future. And that's different than, I'm wishy-washy. I think I'll try to compete, because I read Body for Life. Or whatever,
if I get lean enough, I'll go. That one, that's
yeah,
difficult.
That
makes
one
it,
never works out.
I feel like it makes it more difficult on the person, again, because you have more options. Mm-hmm. It's just like when you're a kid, or like until you're 18, like you go to school because mom's dragging her ass to school because she'll get arrested if you don't go to school, versus your first year of undergrad and you show up like half the time because you could go or you could not go.
Yep. Very true.
Options aren't always the best, in my opinion. I'm not very good at moderation, though, in like anything in life.
Well, I mean, a version of moderation is simply knowing when to turn the switch off, even if it is kind of a binary thing. So you found the way that works for you, and I think that's another very important thing, is that sacrificing to win looks different for different people. Because every single person. Even if we're only talking about people who have that 100% commitment to their goal, have different lives, Yeah. So, the father of 3 with a full-time job might be 100% committed to bodybuilding in the context of that. He might go hard as he possibly can on his 3-day-per-week training program, but that's all he can. That's period. There's no other option.
Right.
It's kind of the same thing. A good father and a good husband and a good businessman or whatever a career is. Those things get ticked. And so then within the context of that life, he's 100% committed. I think that's kind of the way I see it, at least.
When you say that, it reminds me of how we're all very committed to our training, but it's very different between all us coaches. Mm-hmm. It's very, very different. And rightfully so, because our situations are pretty different.
That's a damn good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're all committed to coaching, but in different ways, too. Mm-hmm. Different aspects. Okay. Do you feel, Berto, that you have more people overly obsessed to the point of it being negative, or more people that are almost like loose to the point where it's detrimental to their goals?
That's changed over the years.
Okay.
Quite a bit. Yeah. I think the first batch of athletes we had, it was one of those things where, like, slow down. Like, I want you to conserve energy. Whereas in more recent times, it's like, wake up. Like, you are 6 weeks out from your show. Like, maybe we should start, like, stepping a little faster.
Yeah.
So it's changed. But when you've done this long enough, you understand how it's going to, eventually, I feel like it's going to swing back the other way. And it's just one of those things that will forever be that way. I'm kind of hoping that it does start to swing back the other way pretty soon here. And there's going to be a sweet spot in between there where it's like, oh, all these athletes that I'm getting, they understand that they don't want to be like this last batch that, just.
Yeah. I find in the last year too that the biggest barrier, I don't want to say like excuse, barrier, roadblock, whatever it is, that tends to pop up the most with athletes who verbalize their commitment, but the actions that most likely pull them away from that are social outings. Whether that's someone's in town or they went to an event or so-and-so got married or whatever throughout that. What are some ways that you guys with athletes in that similar situation have helped advise? Like, do you give straight guidelines? Like, we only eat out this often. We don't at all. Have your one day. Like, can we talk about all the ways that we help that? Or do y'all even agree with that social outings tends to be one of y'all's biggest, what's a nice way to say it? Help me out.
Stumbling blocks?
Yeah. Because we're humans, right? And we need other people in our lives, but...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say... I would probably agree with that. I think basically trying to fit bodybuilding into normal life is probably the hardest thing for people. And I like to give very pragmatic guidelines to people. Very quickly, when someone, they give you the report and they're talking about all the struggling they have.
Yeah.
You can tell, I find that with my clients, I can tell, and I'm not taking on a whole lot of new clients right now, so we're probably talking, maybe this is a slightly different era. This is probably closer to when we started to see that big batch of the not outwork generation, let's put it that way. I would find, so they would bring up, they have some issue with the social outing or whatever. And my mindset is, coming from the outwork generation
mm-hmm.
and having that be our initial batch of clients is, they're looking for practical, logical solutions. So I give them, here's an easy way to do it. You beat the DD, feel free to go out, get diet soda or do that. And then their response is normally either nothing or just continuing to talk about how hard it is or something. And I start to realize, they're not looking for solutions.
They're looking for, is it okay that I did this?
Yeah, they think something's wrong. Like, they should be able to do everything exactly the way they were doing it before and still, hashtag aesthetic lifestyle kind of thing. Like, it's just gonna by osmosis. And I found from say 2012 to 14, I was having a lot more, hey, let's hop on Skype. Look, let's be very clear on what you're getting yourself into, buddy, or gal.
Mm-hmm.
This is not easy. And it's gonna push you to where you haven't been. When before it was like, let's hop on Skype. So, hey, you're crazy and you need to chill out.
Yeah.
It's almost like I think the culture of the tribe fluxes in and out, and I guess my little wannabe social anthropologist is that I think people who are doing bodybuilding primarily to find a group that they socially find acceptance with are the ones who are the most victim to those tidal waves.
Mm-hmm.
But people who do bodybuilding and then find social acceptance typically are the ones who can take a step back and going, what are all these people doing? Like, kind of, I guess what we're kind of doing. We're on our high horse, talking smack about the younger generation, talking about how it's changed over time. But I remember I was like, I want to do this natural bodybuilding thing, and I found Berto, and I was like, hey, this is so cool. There's someone else who's doing this.
Yeah. And
I think now that it's big enough that there is somewhat, and the internet's so much more connected, that people will go, hey, I want to be a part of that, And I think the order of that does affect the mentality of the person. And not to say that you can't start there and get better, but if you come from it from a place of social acceptance first, then I think sometimes that can become a rude awakening.
Yeah, and I think almost my high horse is like unfair because at first I was like, I was the crazy person by myself, off in Oklahoma, whatever, the only person over there sacrificing to win in the way that I was, and whatever, starvation diet, right? And then that prep in 2013 where it was like, but now I can go out with friends, or now I can figure out how to talk to people or see people at the gym that I like. Like, I was in this community, whereas like, but it was the bodybuilding community. So I'm going out with Berto as my hashtag going out with friends, but it's like, that's my coach, and he's watching me pick the spinach off the salad bar, And so it's almost unfair for me to say that I've found balance, because I am now in a community of people that are just like me. So I guess that would be way more difficult if I was
So
like, I
like a
didn't
cult
have
member.
friends. Yeah, I was like, I didn't have friends, and now I do. But it's like, oh wait, my friends are me, and they fully understand. Whereas most people have like real friends that do other things besides bodybuilding.
I don't know if that's, but I think this is a product of the internet. Like, every weird fetish or cult or belief system or anything you can think of, it used to be like you were the one guy.
Yeah.
And, it's like, really? Nobody else likes feet, But now...
Nobody
but
likes
now
donkeys? What?
Come on, seriously. But now with the internet, you can find 1,500 people, and there's message boards dedicated to that,
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened for bodybuilding. And the reason why bodybuilders would be social isolationists is actually because it made it easier for them to follow their diet. And there were negative consequences to that, So that's the whole thing of finding balance. Like, look, we got to face these challenges. I know that makes it harder going out with your friends, but there's worse things that happen if you were completely socially isolated. So now that you can actually find a community, you can go out and not socially isolate with a group of people who go, no. Andrew's prepping. She's good with the Diet Coke and the Caesar salad chicken on the side.
Like, it's not weird when I go out with my friends, whereas I could imagine if I was an undergrad still, that would be a little bit difficult, because I was getting shit-faced all the time. So,
and that there's actually a message that's not really a part of this podcast there, that your environment is a key part to your success, and controlling your environment, finding positive people. Like, I mean, honestly, some of the most unhappy people I know find other unhappy people, and they sit around and just talk about how the world's terrible, and they complain about people together.
And it's everyone else's fault.
Yeah, and they reinforce their own negative behaviors. And so if you're listening and you're finding that you are trend towards depression or anger or sadness, and you are seeking that out and creating more of it in your life, stop and find some people very different than you, because it'll be the best thing you did for yourself.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's
that was actually bodybuilding in my life. Like, when I think about that, it's just where I started versus where it took me. It's like, now my whole collection of friends, they're just, without bodybuilding, like, who knows where I'd be. Like, I stop and think about that, even though it's a friendly reminder every time me and Leanna have guests over. We have one right now, and then a few weeks ago we had another one, who they're just like, I guess, DYELs, right, as the kids say. They don't partake in the lifting. And so we have to have dinner with him, and that's kind of weird, like, to us. It's like, oh, really? She usually just makes her own thing.
Yeah.
I make my own thing.
Brandon's dad freaked out whenever he was like, oh, y'all don't, she doesn't cook for you? I'm like, he wouldn't want to eat what I'm eating, and I wouldn't want to eat what he's eating. And we're like we eat together almost every meal, but it's not even close to the same. And not like because he's a dude and he eats more. Yeah, we eat around each other. we Netflix and chill together, but we don't actually ever eat the same meal. Literally never. And like he would never ask that of me, and I would never for him. That's so funny. That like blows people's minds that we don't do those kinds of things. And like you said, or you can be like, oh no, she's prepping. Like, we'll all go out to dinner, and everyone that has like broccoli in a dry steak and dry potato, it's like, well, obviously they're competing soon, and they're only out because this is an occasion, and nobody judges them. It's funny. So we just picked our friends.
It's tough on people. Like, if people don't like hanging out with the bodybuilders, or they need a break from it, then that can be difficult. I met a lot of people like that. They're like, I really just don't like most of the bodybuilders.
I'm the opposite. When I was really in it, I would have a hard time being around people who didn't understand, because all they're doing is, because I look a certain way, so all they're doing is looking at my plate and asking me what I eat. And if it is like that one outing, Yeah. If it is that one outing, I'm like, I don't feel like telling y'all that I don't eat like this every meal, because like I wish I could have that piece of cake and look like you. It's like, this is the only cake I've had in like 3 months, bro. Like,
Yeah. And then that was my point, is that so if for some reason you hang out with people who aren't bodybuilders, it's very different, because then, try to say that, oh no, I'm prepping in front of your grandmother. Be like, what are you talking about?
It's offensive with the Browns. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the brown skins. Yeah.
Honestly, more cultures than not, eating is a big familial thing, and respectful thing. And you say yes. And I mean, I've had Filipino clients tell me that. I've had Mexican clients. I've had Italian clients tell me that. I've had Jewish clients tell me that. So, yeah.
And the thing is, if you actually are sacrificing to win in between those family gatherings, they won't kill you. It's the frequency of the non-sacrificing to win days or meals or whatever.
Another way of looking at sacrificing to win is doing things in a way that are uncomfortable for you. And for a lot of people, and I'll include myself in this, it's planning things in advance.
Yeah.
Like I tend to my natural personality is just to go with the flow, And I've even found a way to do that with bodybuilding in many ways. Like it took me a long time to really program for myself. And then once I did it, I was like, oh my God, I'm making gains again. But with nutrition, like I'm not one of those people who cooks on Sundays, and I just fit my macros on almost a day-to-day basis, kind of freestyling, and buy just a bunch of random shit at the store and then just to see how it goes,
Yeah.
But when I have to travel, or if a holiday is coming up, especially with clients, like I try to help them with that. Like I know Christmas is coming up, like 2 weeks before, I go, hey, let's game plan this out. Let's figure out how we can get the same target deficit to that point for the plan on Christmas. And a lot of my clients and a lot of people just in general who don't have a personality of being kind of A-type planning, they wouldn't do that normally. And I think that is something that is included in, finding the quote-unquote sacrifice to win is going outside of your comfort zone mentally and figuring out how to plan and how to change your behavior, which is hard because it's just not what your brain does naturally.
I'm the opposite, not the opposite, but like I agree that planning is useful. And me, as soon as prep starts, I eat like the exact same 3 or 4 meals a day. And then like, okay, macros changed. Well, I'm going to, shift 20 grams of oats to this meal and then drink 10 more grams of carbs during training because now it's later. Like the little baby shifts happen as prep evolves. Or like,
that's funny.
Why is that funny?
That's funny because people who are overly planned and scheduled run into different problems because they can't freestyle their macros. They're the ones who something that they couldn't plan or account for happens, and their numbers all over the place, and they get really frustrated. So those are the people who I go, right, I know you make a meal plan for yourself every day, but on Friday I want you to go to the grocery store and just figure out what you're eating on the day of, because I think that's a useful skill to be able to have. Yeah. Just like your hippie go with the flow bodybuilder needs to learn how to plan when stuff comes up, your overly anal retentive OCD bodybuilder needs to know how to go with the flow when that happens as well.
Yeah. The big fix for me was carrying carrots and jerky.
There you go.
Like anytime I was leaving the house, I'm like, there's a pack of baby carrot because I know that's 6 carbs, 10 protein, like no fat. So it'll at least last me till I get home. Like that was my big thing, was taking jerky literally everywhere. Or packies of pork rinds. Remember, Bert? My packies of pork rinds are always in my purse too. Just fat if I needed it.
Walton Farms too.
Yeah, Walton Farms dressing packets lived in my car also. But if it worked out, we figured it out.
You can always get a dry salad and a chicken breast if you need to.
Yeah. So I mean, you're right. It's a skill, but that's you would think, right? Those come with time, but I don't know. I deal with how to talk people through shifting into the sacrifice to win mentality.
I mean, I'm sure
we all do, but you think what?
I think that's part of it, though. Honestly, like for you, because of your background as an athlete and all that, like making everything to a T, it comes naturally. Yeah. That's not hard for you. Relaxing a little bit or trying to figure out a way to have that dimmer, that is harder, And Roberto kind of came from the opposite background, like learning how to grind and when to be really, really tick those boxes. Like, yeah, basically wherever it's going to take everything out of you to do a prep. Mm-hmm. So you have to develop your weaknesses become apparent,
Yeah.
no matter what they are, even though you and Berto have opposite weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
When you go through prep, they both bite you in the ass. And all of our first preps, we are a victim to our weaknesses.
Yeah.
So you have to end up developing your weak points, and which is why bodybuilding is so intriguing and it pulls you in, is because it exposes your weaknesses and it prevents you from hiding from them in many ways, and then you force you to grow. And hopefully that spills in other areas of life. Not always, but that's our approach.
Yeah,
and it's so personal too, because you could have a guy up there with a great physique, like he nailed his first prep, but then after he's done with his prep, he's like, there's a lot of things about myself that I need to work on, and you get to work on them. And I think that's like the biggest trophy you're ever going to get from competitive bodybuilding, is seeing parts of yourself that I think would have gone undiscovered without it.
And I think that every prep at some point, right? I've never met a single person that didn't finish it saying that's the hardest thing I've ever done, or I know myself so much more now, all that stuff. And if you didn't, like, if you're halfway through a prep currently, whoever's listening, and you're, or some dieting that you want to do, whatever physique goal, and you don't feel like I feel like you almost have to feel kind of lonely and in a dark place to get there. And if you haven't even felt close to that, and you still have 20, 30, like, if you're not reaching your goals, but you still feel fucking great every day, it's like, well, I think that's a reward of it and a side effect of it.
The harder something is, the more appreciation you have for overcoming it.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that bodybuilding is really freaking hard, even for genetically gifted, mentally gifted, what have you, type of people, So
it's lonely. Like, not just, even if you have a lot of friends, like, you have to do your cardio. Like, you have to sit there for 30 to 60 minutes, most people, most of the days of the week, And, I don't know. I feel like prep almost gets easier in that way, in that I have to spend more time alone thinking about what I'm doing. Like, as cardio increases, I have more me time, and I have more, like, self-development time. More hunger actually decreases throughout prep for me, because it becomes like I'm eating for like I'm numb to eating, because I'm like, fuck it, this is my meal. Like, it's good, but like I think it's easier to be desensitized to food. I don't know.
Prep does feel like a trek on a mountain by yourself for months. At certain points.
Just out of curiosity, what's our most memorable goat killing here? Our most memorable sacrifice during a prep, whether it be a day, a training session, or a specific moment.
Recently or ever?
Whenever, that you just remember vividly to this day when you think of, like, deep, dark contest prep.
Losing my best friend in grad school. It wasn't a day. It was like the whole prep. Her being, like, somewhere in the middle, being like, you're different. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm fine. You just don't understand. Like, I remember it. And so then we were, like, kind of meh for, like, the next 2 or 3 years. And I lived with her, but I was in my room in the office watching y'all's videos, Ogus's videos, and Lean Body Lifestyle, or I was in the kitchen making that shit by Michael Corey, or I was at the gym, or sleeping because I had to get up at 4 a.m. to do my fasted cardio. And I lived with her, lost her. We're cool now, but it was shitty.
That was awesome. Very honest too. Yeah.
Helms?
Mine's easy. I know the darkest for sure. That was my dad dying in the middle of my 2009 prep, or at the very start. Mm-hmm. And then that year, every fucking month, it got worse. So, like, I remember it being 2 months after my dad died, and I tore my hamstring. And then coming into the gym on crutches to do lower body rehab and upper body machines. And then going back to deadlifts. That was really hard for me after having torn it, just having to accept that it was there, and then having to just drive my calories down so low because I was so stressed. Like, I remember that the squat session that we always reminisce about, Berto, that was a great example. I was not in a good mood. It felt terrible. I was on 1,600 calories, and I had to go in there and do, like, 3x5 at 315 2 months after I tore my hamstring or something like that, and it was close to my old max. And just feeling like death the whole time. But, yeah, so all of 2009, that made me into a that taught me where my depths were. So.
Yeah. I remember that season very, very vividly, as I would go spend almost every weekend with Eric. And, talk about sacrificing to win. That was the best example I could think of.
And you?
We didn't win, though. We didn't get a pro card.
No.
We sacrificed to lose. Don't worry about it.
We sacrificed to win. I only sacrifice to win divisions. No, I don't sacrifice to win overalls.
Hey, at least y'all have won a division.
Should have tried harder.
I'm really good at second place, y'all. I'm really good at it.
Hey, you sacrificed to beat third.
Hey, best poser. I got best poser a couple times. Sacrifice for that.
Oh. Hey, we had 3 best posers on the team.
Hey. But
I got Alberto.
That's funny though that I didn't even think about diet or training when you asked me my sacrifice. Because it's just like, meh, whatever. Like, that was the job. Duh. Like, that's how it feels to me. All right. What about you, Bert?
I'd have to say it's similar to Eric's. So yeah, I lost my best friend. Like it was the week before my pro debut, so during peak week. And I think what it did for me is, up until that point, I thought this was like the hardest thing I had ever done in my life, and it just put things in perspective. And it just made me realize.
So just to clarify, sorry, I don't want to hate to interrupt, but just to clarify, because Andrea said I lost my best friend. You said you lost your best friend. You mean he physically is not with us?
Yeah, no, Laura's still alive. She's chilling. She's all right.
Yeah. So I legit lost my best friend.
He passed away. Yes.
He passed away, and so what that did for me, it made things very clear. I think up until that point, a part of me was like, I was on my bodybuilding high horse. I was like, this is what I do. I work really hard. I'm about it, right? And
no limit.
No limits. No limits to my sacrifice. But that brought me back down to earth, and I think it just made me a lot more grateful and thankful that I am here to make those decisions, that I can do these things, that I can just feel pain, to be honest. So that's probably like the most, like deep look into myself that like I've ever had from a contest prep.
Okay. Can we? Berto's on a motorcycle right now, y'all. Currently.
That's just doing a high hog.
So we've talked a lot about how, the mental switch, or we don't like saying mental switch. What do you like saying? We don't say belief or philosophy. What do we say, Eric?
No, I'm good with the mental. I like the switch. I like because it's full commitment.
All right, commitment. Right, we talked about the psychological commitment that you've made to do it, and that isn't always so easy for everybody. But something that you talked about in a different podcast, Bert, which I don't think we've talked about enough, when we talk about sacrificing and like going there, #go dare with a D, is training while in a deficit. And how you'd said that not only, one of our two things, like, one of the biggest things is muscle maintenance, right? And that maybe you're not necessarily dying so hard your muscles falling off, but maybe because you're dieting and feel like shit, you're not training as hard as you should be. Let's talk about that. Who wants to talk about it?
I guess,
like learning how to, like, when people lose strength immediately, where it's like, are you losing strength, or are you just kind of being a pansy because you feel like shit?
Yeah, that was like what I was talking about earlier, that one squat session.
Yeah.
Walking out 315 just felt, I don't know. There was a switch that was flipped, and I just did it. I had to disconnect myself from my emotions, because if I didn't, I would have just racked it again and been like, that probably should do 225. Like, that is way too heavy. If I sit down, I'll never get back up with that on my back.
Well, and I think now you know, too, that, like, you don't have to do that 90% weight maybe to keep your gains. But at the same time, it was what you had planned and you got it done. And that's the switch that you had made,
It's important to know, it was important to know that I could. And I remember in 2007, when I was younger and more airy-fairy with my approach to things and life in general, my training changed drastically as I got closer to comp, and all of a sudden I was doing 12s and 15s. It's not because I bought into the high rep stuff. It was because I felt capable of doing that. I did not feel capable of doing heavy weights.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like feeling weak. So I kind of self-perpetuated a progressive underload.
I'm here to lose, guys. Yeah. Well, I think, like, with me, right, the way I would...
Sacrifice to lose.
Yeah. The way that I would mind ninja myself into all my sessions with my OCD as a tool in my pocket was just tracking my fucking training, right? I knew whatever I did last week, I can do. And that was it, right? Is maybe I'm getting smaller, but I'm like, well, if I did... Like, when I was with Bert, obviously, anything that was on my sheet, if it was percentage-based, I'm like... I have a good coach. If this is on my sheet, I can obviously physically do it. Even if I felt like shit, I was like, logically, percentage-wise, I can do this. And so, like, that was where I would always go. Before that, when I was programming for myself with, like, bullshit numbers, it was like, I did this last week, I can do it. And I think maybe I lost 5 to 10 pounds on a few lifts by the end of it because I lost 30 pounds in, like, 10 weeks. But...
Berto gives everybody the same program, right?
Oh, yeah, that's the rumor, right?
No,
he's like, shit, you sold me out. No, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like, if it's
another program,
make that one for the next year or two. No, but like that was, to me, it was, I had to use my black and white because that worked, right? It wasn't, so I didn't do very good on RPE because I would still chase what I did last week. And so my RPE based program, I'm supposed to like perceive shit. I was like, look at last week's, you did it then, you can do it this week. And so whether it felt like a 9 or a 6, it was fucking getting done. Whether that's good or bad.
Last week RPE.
Yeah, last week's RPE. So that's how I guess, and I do that to this day too. Because I work with a lot higher percentages now, a lot more often obviously than when I was in prep. But that's still... I have to be very objective, especially on days when I feel like shit. If I feel great, I don't need to look at last week's, last month's, whatever. But if I'm like not feeling amazing, I'm just like, okay, what did you do last week or the week before? You're fucking fine. You can do it. So, yeah. What do you do when you have someone on RPE and you're like, you can't be going down 10 pounds every week? Like, how do you train grit in that way?
Take them off RPE.
That's a... yeah, exactly.
Take them off there.
Like you mentioned, there's people that during prep, they're going to grind themselves into dust, and then there's other people that it's like, dude, you can get this out of you, quit being a little baby.
Yeah.
And you know, with the right approach, you can help stimulate the desired behavior from the athlete. But I think it's at the end up to the athlete to understand how, you know, which way they kind of swing, what they're most prone to doing. And just between us coaches, we have different tendencies when it comes to our training. Yeah. And I think we've gotten to the point over the last few years where we're better at identifying that. So yeah, that's I think was it a Zerdos thing, Eric? Quote about discipline. Sometimes discipline is like not doing something, basically.
It might be.
Yeah.
He has a few good quotes, I guess.
He's all right.
Hopefully he's listening.
Hate that guy.
But
that son of a bitch. God.
Stupid Mike Zerdos. If that is a Zerdos quote, it's very unlike him because it sounds intelligent. But no, I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, that's a very good point. It's having the discipline to know when not to go there. You know.
Yeah.
And on that topic of I'm on a moped, apparently. I'm not a
I know, he's changing vehicles every 5 minutes.
What is going on?
Yeah. But on that RPE note, I find RPE can be the exact perfect thing for someone or the exact wrong thing for someone when they're during prep. And it really depends on why are their loads going down. If it's simply because it feels really hard and they don't know what they can do in that state. If there's someone who does have grit, but they're just not quite, they don't know where the limit is. They'll learn it. That's when you go, right, I'm just going to give you percentages, you know. And if it ends up being you physically can't do it, you'll understand. Wow, I pushed my really hard, and I could do it. I almost could do it, and that trains grit. in other cases, sometimes the person just needs a more objective feedback. So I tell them to give me an RPE after they look at a video of them lifting, and they go, "Oh wow, it felt terrible. The bar was moving good. I guess my RPE wasn't as low as I thought." So there's multiple ways to teach someone to be able to differentiate between their true capabilities and what is just the same thing that they did last week, but feels way worse or way harder. Because not everyone has that kind of just flip the switch. If I could do it last week, I can do it this week kind of mentality.
Yeah. I'm still not good at RP. Like, I don't think I'm a person for it. Because now with this grid training, a thing that we do, or that we used to try to do, was work to a heavy single, drop 5%, and then, like, I'd have an assignment or whatever, right? And my heavy single, I'm like, I'm PRing this shit. Like, I know better than that. But I still, like, I'm sitting there looking at him like, but maybe, you know? Like, all the time. And it's stupid. I'd be mad at a client if they did that. But I know this about myself, and I'm like, Coach, I don't think... Actually, no, he was like, why are you doing this? This is not PR Fest. I'm like, yeah, that's a good point.
And that's when you need... Oh, actually, it's funny. I was just talking about this in the lab with Mike. We were talking about how... So, for example, right now with my deadlifts, I do a lot of singles. And I've been experimenting with... record the velocity of the first single, and then I keep doing singles until I lose 20% of velocity. So that's saying, hey, that's 20% velocity decay, and that's based off a study. And I'm not going to get too sciencey, but the point is
are you wearing an accelerometer?
I'm using a gym wear. Basically, it's a version of a Tendo. Yeah. Okay. So I have this. You can't just magically do this, but there are systems out there to do it. Anyway, so I'm tracking my velocity and have a little sensor on the bar, and I have an objective way of knowing when my performance has degraded, and I'm going to shut it down, right? But Zerdos and I were saying we agree that RPE is actually better if the person can honestly assess it, because sometimes you can have a bad velocity because your form is off, or sometimes the fact that it is feeling very hard is more important than the fact that you're able to maintain velocity and you are incurring fatigue. It's just, for whatever reason, not quite showing up on the bar. So with a self-aware, honest lifter who isn't too kind of like, all go like you are, it can be very useful. But for someone like you, Andrea, and I think it's a good personality trait you have just have to know how to use it. It would be better to have some kind of objective criteria. Yeah. And you could be like, right, so I'm not going to use RPE, but I'm going to track my velocity, and I'll go until I see some thing.
That's cool.
Thing. So I think it depends on the individual.
Bert, any grit? Is that even what I would call it? Grit training, or training people to feel like if you have someone that you're like, I think you're kind of bitching out. Like, how does that talk go for you? Or do you tell them that? Because that would be awesome. I'm just kidding. Yeah,
I know you do, but I think in different ways.
Well, certainly. Yeah, that's what I meant.
In different ways, like you said, some people Mike Ditka, who, for those of you who don't know, he's like the meanest NFL coach ever, and other people you just kind of just find other much more subtle, kind methods to encourage them to realize that they can work harder. I think honestly it's one of those things that you have to kind of discover as an athlete. I think prior to bodybuilding, I was a very, very lazy athlete. Very, very lazy. Like, incredibly lazy athlete. And this was like the one sport where I realized that to a certain extent, what I put into it is what I get. And it had all these other cool features outside of training that I think kind of babysat me, and I like that. But it was something that I had to identify on my own, and I had to be very honest and self-aware about that. This is kind of where you suck, buddy. You should probably work on that. So yeah, you can encourage an athlete to work on this and that, but it's up to them to, should they agree, to really get to work on that.
Yeah.
I think, Berto, you said something really important there, was that you can work on that. And I think, in Western culture and like in America, a lot of the times we have this double standard where we know that the body can change. You can get more athletic. You can always grow or get bigger, faster, stronger. That's a core tenet of our ethos, is that we can always improve our body, and there's always the next level to attain it, even if it requires an incomprehensible amount of work. But you can't get smarter, or you can't change a character flaw, or and the reality is that if anything, our mind is even more plastic than our body. We have a tremendous capacity to change intellectually, mentally, emotionally, and I think that verbiage when you do have that conversation with the client of, look, hey, you're kind of a wuss, but that's changeable. You can, like, I've even seen this argument. I think it was the Lane Norton quote. I'm not trying to call him out. It was really funny. Someone was like, making fun of him because he wasn't strong enough back in like 2008 or something like that. Like, and he was like, well, I can always get stronger, but you can't fix stupid, you know? And it's a good response. It was funny, and the guy shouldn't have been making fun of him and all that. So this isn't a call out, but it's just funny that is kind of the automatic place we go to. You can't fix stupid. Of course you can fix stupid. Like, I was a moron, and most of us were morons before we were smart if we got smart. So I think letting your clients know and encouraging them to understand that who they are now can change drastically. They can get smarter. And I don't just mean memorizing more knowledge. I mean actually developing critical thinking. Is definitely probably has more capacity to grow than your friggin' pecs.
Well, and then I'd argue that the smarter you become, or not even smarter, the more aware you become, the better your body will end up. Like, if you can understand, all right, this is pain, but like, it's temporary, it's gonna go away. Like, it just hurts right now, or this is a struggle right now, or with my case, I did this last week, you're going to be fine, kind of thing. That in turn leads to better musculature over time, so I think that's a good, I guess, distinction to make, is like you said, you can work on your body, or people think you can work on your mind, but it's like, yeah, but if you work on your mind, it affects the body as well. They're not. Your
brain is your body. But the point is that from a coaching perspective, is when you have those talks, you have to make sure that the client, the person you're working with, the athlete, doesn't see those things as unchangeable, or it's just a destroying conversation.
Yeah.
Tell somebody, guess what, you're broken. That's not a useful conversation. But if you can help them understand that this is a goal to work towards, and you have a system to do that, you've helped others achieve it, you yourself have even achieved it, then all of a sudden that can not only help them achieve that, but it can give them much more self-efficacy and a true understanding of how they can grow as a person.
So if we wanted to try to put like evidence to that, or at least anecdotal evidence to that, how long is someone in a deficit before you tend to actually see them with strength decrements? Typically, if we're losing at a recommended rate.
I would say it depends on how you track it. Like, if you were to track it with Wilks, or if you were to track absolute strength,
I'd say absolute on the list, because most bodybuilders are looking at, like, did my bench go down kind of shit.
That's a problem. They shouldn't. They should be looking at something like a Wilks score, in my opinion.
Okay.
So that's another thing.
Yeah, so just convincing them that they're becoming smaller humans. Yeah.
Right. Go ahead. So I try to explain to them, like, look, dude, sure, you used to bench 315 when you were 210. Now you're 175 and you bench 290. You're stronger. They don't get that at first, Yeah. But when you explain it, when you show them, like, look, if you decided to go compete in powerlifting right now, you would beat your older self in the overall. That's something that they get, So I think it's very important to explain relative strength to people and have to help them understand that simply larger bodies move larger weight, and even if you're not losing muscle mass, or simply that you cannot carry the same amount of muscle mass with a high level of body fat,
Yeah.
So there's no point in worrying about whether you can maintain every ounce of lean body mass from when you're 210 when you get down to 175.
Yeah.
So,
how do we quantify this very generally for people to understand, like, oh, you've been dieting for 3 months, you shouldn't have lost 20 pounds on your bench kind of shit?
They might lose 20 pounds on the bench.
In 3 months? If they've been dieting for 3 months?
Well, sometimes.
What do they bench for 20?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, okay. Good points.
Yeah, if you're a chick, probably not,
I know with me, I'm like, 20 pounds. Okay.
Yeah, 20 pounds is like
percentage-wise, I realize that's a much bigger deal for me. Okay.
Yeah. Not a fourth. That's not true. But I think it's not at all abnormal to lose 10 to 20% of your absolute strength from start to finish a prep. 10 would be good, 20 would be on the higher side.
Yeah.
Like if you
And
had
it gets better. It gets better with every prep, I feel.
To keep, do you think you get better at? Well, it's not like it's gonna go away. Because I was gonna say, do you think you get better at grinding during your sessions, or you get better at maintaining mass? But then that's kind of like you're a more mature athlete either way.
I've gotten better at chilling out. That's been my thing. I used to grind myself.
Because you waste.
And
yeah, that's right.
I used to think I'm never going to be that guy that can be lean and strong, ever. Mm-hmm. That's just never going to happen. I'm just not fit to be that dude. Mm-hmm. And I think now I do pretty well at that. And I think in part because I know what I'm prone to. And I know that I'm more likely to take it too far when I shouldn't be.
Yeah. I used to be the guy who loses 20% of my strength, and now I'm the guy who loses 10%.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there's just, like you said, I never thought I was the guy. And I think that the shittiest thing to hear for someone getting this sport is like, you just need time. Like, that's the shittiest thing to hear, right? But that's everything that you think you're not good enough at in 5 years, you're going to be, if you stick to it, you're going to look back, you know? So
I don't even think that's the shit. I think it's one of the most important things people need to recognize.
Yeah.
Because
there's so much mentality that goes into that. Like,
yeah.
You're people who are urgently searching for magic solutions. Like once they finally realize that there aren't any, that's a loss of romanticism and loss of hope in some ways briefly, but it should be eventually realizing, oh, I have the power in my hands. It's not out there. I'm not going to go out and find some magic. Like, it's going to be me being committed to a goal for a decade.
Yeah. And what's funny is I remember telling Berto when I was about maybe not even a month away from my last show, I was like averaging body weight like 116 to 119, right? And we were talking about when I'm done, I'm going to do powerlifting next year. And we're talking about weight classes. And I was like, well, 123 is going to be easy. And if I get to 130, I probably won't be above 130 ever. I don't plan on it. I can't imagine being that far from stage weight. Now, fast forward, I'm probably the best I've ever looked not on stage, and I'm 146. Back then, I'd been like, 146 is obese. There's no fucking way in my whole life I'll ever weigh that much again. I literally thought that. And so that's just that was 3 years ago. I never thought I could weigh this much, you know? And like Bert saying, you never thought you'd be lean and strong. Like how many years ago? Like 4 or 5 years ago? It's just how things can change. It just goes so fast.
I realistically never thought I'd be good at bodybuilding, to be honest. And now I'm okay at it. I'm much better than I was.
I'm pretty all right.
15 years ago, yeah. And I think if you would have told that kid, hey, it's going to take about a decade, maybe I might have had a different perspective on that. But I think now I hear a decade, I'm like, dude, I have a decade of like progressive training, 20 years if I like really stay healthy. Like to me, that's the most exciting thing, that I can have this. This can be a part of my life for a very, very long time. I think that's I want to sacrifice to win for that long.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a big part of me.
Well, and there's I highly doubt he would ever listen to it. So there's this new kid at the place I train at, super duper new, might be super early 20s, just started. And I hear him saying, he was like, well, you know, the open, like the thing that starts the CrossFit season is in like 6-7 months, so I really got to get to it, you know. And I'm like, dude, you know, the people in the games have been training for like 15 years, right? You know, but he automatically, you get so excited, just like me. I'm like, I'm going to compete this season in figure, and I sucked balls, you know. I mean, I did all right placement wise, but I look at it and I'm like, you barely made bikini, bro. Like, you had no size. But it's funny how, like, again, we get so obsessed and we say like that's how you get to where you need to be, but at the same time, it's like so unrealistic that I could see how if someone told, I couldn't even, when Chris Voss told me you should wait till next year, I was like, no, I need to do it now. Like, that's a terrible idea. But you couldn't have told me otherwise, you know. Like, I would have been discouraged if someone said 10 years. I don't know.
Yeah, that's one thing. I think there's that kind of like expert bias, you know. Like once you've done something and understand it from the perspective of hindsight, and you've had it for 10 years, then you think, oh, that's how one. If I only knew this, or people should think this way, or if I could impart something onto you. But a lot of the times as a coach, I'm like, yeah, you're hungry and you have semi-unrealistic expectations. Mm-hmm. I'll plant a little seed, but I'm not going to try to. It'll be counterproductive to try to change the mindset, you know. So
right.
like for example, if Andrea Valdez came to me from the past and said, I'm going to compete this season, and I could tell that it was just going to absolutely happen no matter what, I'd be like, all right, so we're going to do this. It's not going to go as well as you'd hoped, and it's going to be here are the issues, but I wouldn't stand in your way.
Right.
Then I'd go, okay, now let's look back and what did we learn from that, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So it's like and I didn't have a coach either at the time, so right, like I was, and again, it went all right. It's not like it was a disaster, but it's that difference between like you don't want to crush their dreams, but like again, me being like I'll never be over 130 pounds, and it's like that happened like shit within 6 months. But everything in hindsight, right? And you don't want to crush dreams, but at the same time, like we always say, managing expectations is one thing.
Reframing perspective, managing expectations. That's our role.
Yeah. I really had something awesome to say, and then I forgot it. I feel like it was really great, though.
I'm just thinking about it. I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Andrea.
You're welcome. I totally forgot.
That was very valuable.
Thanks. Sacrifice to win. We're calling this that, right?
I think that should be the name.
Okay.
We said it enough times.
Yeah, I think that was the plan. Okay, so roundabout message. Helms, you're good at wrapping things up. Give me your summary slide.
I think sacrificing is all context specific. Will you have to sacrifice sleep to get your cardio in and not miss your job or still be a good husband, etc.? That's fantastic. That's good. You should be sacrificing. To tick all the boxes to be successful, you're going to have to choose your priorities. However, if you change your priorities that you had as a person, as a human, for prep, I don't think that's healthy. Like, if you put your PhD on hold, or if you were a bad husband, but if you had to sacrifice other things to do both, that's really what it comes down to. And so I mean, it's something that I think it's always going to be context specific, but the key is commitment, in my mind. It's being committed to your goal fully and doing it for reasons that you understand and that you're committed to.
Word. Bert, you got one too?
No, I think that was really well said. I think one thing when people hear the whole sacrifice to win chant, they automatically assume like unbalanced.
Right.
And there's going to be periods of that. I'm not going to say whenever you want to do something great, but whenever you want to do something that's really worth it to you.
Something so invasive as bodybuilding, it definitely comes with some sacrifices or you won't get there.
I mean, talk to a student who's taking the bar exam next month. They're going to tell you they probably haven't gone out these last few Friday nights. They haven't seen a lot of their friends. They're probably shitty at returning calls. And that's an adult decision you have to make at a certain point. And I think one way I've kind of let the sacrificing be a part of my life is that especially the people immediately around me, I know that sometimes I'm going to take from them, so I will do my best to give them a little bit more when I can, and that way when I'm going to rely on them to, help me out with this or that, maybe I'm a bit messier because I'm contest prepping, that sort of stuff. They got my back, but again, I'm not balanced. I have next year when I do prep, there's going to be segments where my poor dogs are going to get so little attention from me when I'm 1 month out. It's like, here's your ball. Go do
they'll
something
understand.
With it. They'll understand. But yeah. So, right. Balance, I think, again, in context too, right?
Balance and unbalance. Alrighty, friends. Well, until next week.